Digital Color Theory. I'm your instructor, Lauren Meese. The exchange of information on the forum this week has been very interesting, and it's always good to hear different ideas and takes on things. This is the 12th class in the Digital Color Theory series on FX PhD, and in this class I'd like to tie up a few loose ends. In this week's class I'd like to talk about ergonomics, focus and defocus, and some noise reduction. So in last week's class I talked about logarithmic versus linear color space, film basics, and there was a question on the forum regarding an explanation of printer points. So I hope that explanation answered the question. And I talked about dirt fixes, either black dirt, white dirt on film, or fixing dead pixels, or digital dropouts or hits on videotapes. Now I thought I'd talk about the chain of command in the VFX and color correction process. Each facility has a different workflow, but here's a place to start. As a colorist or VFX artist, you're a link in the post-production chain responsible for the look of the project you're assigned. Post facilities are hired by the client. All communication has to go through the post facilities management before it gets to the client, no matter what. Facility owners are in a business situation and are there to make money for their investors, so it's critical that you follow the correct chain of command. Communications between a facility and a client needs to be as clear and concise as possible. As I mentioned, VFX and color correction is a team sport. A client doesn't want to be contacted by numerous people from a facility. It's confusing, and the information may not get back to all team players. The best way to communicate is through your supervisor, who will contact the appropriate parties. If the supervisor thinks it's necessary, they may have you call the client for direction. This industry has so many layers to it. Communication with all the players is the key to providing the client with a great product on budget. Communication to the correct parties in the chain of command are critical for best results. Any creative issues should be directed to your VFX or transfer supervisor. Any technical issues should be directed to both your transfer or VFX supervisor and the engineering department. Don't take it upon yourself to deal with issues, as this could affect a workflow that you're not aware of. I use the 10-minute rule. Once you see a creative issue, you have 10 minutes to gather the information to advise the people who need to know about it. For example, a bad green screen plate, elements out of focus, images not shot in the right orientation. If you have a technical issue, use the same 10-minute rule. For example, no space on a drive, you can't read the files, your monitor isn't calibrated correctly. If you can't fix or develop a game plan to get around an issue, don't wait to call support. You shouldn't have a problem asking for help. You'll have a problem if you don't let people know you're having an issue with a project. Color theory wouldn't be complete without a word about ergonomics, the study of how a workplace and the equipment used there can best be designed for comfort, safety, efficiency, and productivity. Yes, this applies to VFX and color correction as well. Throughout history, wars have brought about new technology. During World War II, these new developments were more complex and put heavy demands on the operators. It was found that the best trained pilots in perfectly good airplanes were crashing, and blame was put on many factors the operators had to contend with. Factors such as situation awareness, quick decision making, and hand-eye coordination. A lieutenant in the U.S. Army demonstrated that by replacing a confusing instrument panel with more logically placed and recognizable controls, pilot error could be greatly reduced. And that thinking, or ergonomics, has continued and moved into varied workplaces. One of the most extreme working environments is in space, so it's only natural that space exploration brought on more studies and insight into ergonomics. That, along with the growing use of computers, has introduced a new field of ergonomics called human-computer interaction. This deals specifically with the interfacing of people with computers and plays into the design of work panels as well as computer hardware and software. This brings us back to our workspace and the necessity to design it to be efficient and comfortable to allow us to be our most productive. We have to work at desks, and because of our palettes and control panels, we need a larger area to hold all the equipment and still work with it. It would be great if we could work from a couch and a coffee table, but that's not going to happen for a while unless you know something I don't know. Maybe there's something new coming at NAB or IBC this year. I'm sure that the majority of you work more than 8 hours and go home with a sore back and eyes. There's ways to minimize this, so let's have a look at it. Your skeleton can best support your body if it's straight, with your body centered on it. Yes, you're hearing this in a color theory class, but if you want to do your passion for a longer period of time, this is how you do it. First off, sit up straight with your feet on the floor. Your ankle, knee, hip, and arm should be as straight as possible for your comfort. I know you can't be a statue, but do your best to stay as straight as possible so you don't get fatigued. Working at a pallet of an Inferno, Smoke, PC, or Mac is basically a typing job. Check out your company's secretary sometime. No, I don't mean it like that. See where she has her keyboard. It's probably 26 to 28 inches from the floor. Why? Because she wants blood flowing into her fingers so her hands don't get cold. Blood flows down into your fingers. If your hands are elevated, your fingers are going to get cold. You're not going to be as eager to work longer because you're uncomfortable. When you reach out for something on your desk, your reach is between 18 and 24 inches. If you have other things on your desk like an audio mixer, router, or phone, you want to have them close to you. A color monitor is equivalent to a 200-watt light bulb. If you have a monitor too close to you, it will cause eye strain. Trying to watch the total movement on a monitor that's too close to you without being able to have something in your peripheral vision will make you puke. Placing your monitor 4 to 6 times the diagonal measurement is a good start point for monitors to judge color. For a status display for your computer, it's a different story. I can understand you have to see what's going on, and the closer your monitor is to you, maybe you need to take more breaks so you don't get eye strain. For looking at a color monitor, you should be looking into it straight in the center of the monitor with your head held straight. This will reduce fatigue by not having to move your head up and down or left and right. It's a good idea to ask the question, where will my images be presented? On television, in a theater, or at a brightly lit trade show? This will give you a clue as to how your room should be lit. Here's an example of a suite setup for television. You need to have some indirect ambient light in the room so you can see the controls. Being in a dark room will make your images look too dark. The monitor surround can be used to show you a white reference at a soothing brightness and correct color temperature of 6500 degrees Kelvin. This is how I would set up a room. You put 2 fluorescent lights on the floor, 2 on the ceiling. These have full spectrum D65 bulbs. I have a little bit of a blind here so that the light coming out of these lights goes right straight down, doesn't shine out to the side. You want it to come straight down. Paint the wall in 18% gray, so once it's hit by the lights it should be pretty much evenly illuminated. And then a couple inches out from the fluorescent lights I would put a milk glass here, which is a 1/8 inch strip of milk glass that you can get from a company like GE Polymers, and that helps to make the light nice and soft. And you want the screen brightness to be about 1/10 of the brightness of the monitor, so whatever you're using, 1/10, and you can use a probe to measure that. And if your lights are too bright, then you put neutral density filter over them until you get them down to the correct brightness value. Now, I like to take my cues for the paint in a suite from an EIA grayscale chart. Everything from just behind your head to the front of the room should be a neutral gray. It should be darker so as not to detract from what's going on the program monitor. But you can certainly use all these shades of gray up to white behind you, and definitely the shades of gray forward in front of you. So it doesn't have to be a bland gray room. You can have different shades of gray, just the fact that they're neutral. And then behind you, you can use slightly tinted colors if you want kind of a nice client area with pale blues, pale reds, pale yellows, whatever, your choice. The front wall can be in the range of an 18% chip on the chart. I like to have this wall lit up with D65 light so I have something to look at to rest my eyes and reset my brain. I use a backlit white piece of milk glass. It's evenly illuminated with color balanced full spectrum fluorescent lights. The screen's brightness should be set to 10% of the monitor's brightness. The monitor will appear to be floating in limbo. Add some black curtains and you're in business. You're looking like a movie theater. If you're working on a film project, shut the monitor surround off and reduce the brightness to 12 to 14 foot lamberts. You can do some Googling to see what this is in candelas or nits. And this type of environment mimics what you have in a theater. The equipment you need to see the most are a waveform monitor or audio meters or a router. These should be placed so that your head doesn't have to tilt more than 15 degrees back and forth and up and down. After a 12-hour day, you may not be doing cartwheels, but you'll feel better not having to have made unnatural head movements. For lighting, you should have the workspace lit. Again, I find fluorescent color-balanced full-spectrum lights do the trick. Make sure you have some type of louvers that direct the light down with a spread of no more than 15 degrees. You don't want to have the light all over the place. Try to keep your viewing looking left to right within 15 degrees because excessive movement will wear on you when you have to work long hours. Remember when your parents said sit up straight? Well, here you go again. For you to be comfortable doing your passion, getting the best chair you can afford will go a long way. Chairs range in price from a few $100s to over $1,000. Carpal tunnel syndrome is a condition that affects both VFX artists and colorists alike. It's caused by the compression of the median nerve in the wrist, and I'm sure you felt the ache in your wrist after working at the keyboard or palette for hours. This condition is caused by the placement of your palette and keyboard. If you have the keyboard on the desk, notice if your fingers are elevated higher than your wrist. If they are, then you're going to have a problem over time. Placing the keyboard and palette so your fingers are flat to the keyboard, say like a laptop computer, is the best way to go. Practically, the placement of the keyboard may be hard to place just above your knees, but be aware of it. You may not be affected by this much now, but when you've been typing for years, you don't want to end up with wearing one of these. Hazards of a VFX artist or colorist, you pretty much have two. You can either fall out of your chair or dump a hot cup of coffee on yourself. And I've even seen a couple of colorists come out of the suite with knob imprints on their foreheads from doing a face plant into the keyboard. So I guess there's probably 3 hazards to working in this industry. So at least you'll have your fingers and toes and not be scarred working in this industry. So count yourself lucky. Here's a few tips on keeping yourself alert while you're doing your job. Avoid drinking coffee. Take regular breaks when working to avoid eye strain. Drink unsweetened juice instead of the coffee. And here's always a good one, get 8 to 10 hours of sleep, like that happens. So as Phil Esterhaus said on Hill Street Blues, let's be careful out there. YouTube, the medium for everyone's 15 seconds of fame, has this video related to the studies of ergonomics and repetitive stress injuries. So if you want to laugh, you can take a look at this. Periodic noise can be introduced into a video stream during acquisition or transmission due to electrical or electromechanical interference. Noise and its origin noise in a digital image consists of visible errors, which are created by an electrostatic charge within the camera and a process that converts an analog signal to its digital elements. These errors are transferred to the image as part of the detail of the image and appear as bright, colored, or dark specks. As such, noise is actually detail in the image that does not appear as it's expected to due to an error in the image capture process. Various factors affect noise, ranging from the presence of light at the time of capture, exposure time, or sensor, CCD or CMOS temperature, and the manner in which the camera's sensor processes the image. These errors appear in print and on screen as distracting aberrations which, when visible to the human eye, distract the viewer and create an unnatural appearance. Now, what is visible noise? Today's cameras use a combination of CCD and CMOS technology to turn light waves into electrical signals. You might say that these cameras are digital and their images should be noise-free. Well, you're half right. The place we see the noise is in the analog stage, where the light is converted into electrical energy. The sensors are designed to deal with an image that has a brightness value to it. If you can't see anything, it's radio, right? The image sensor have a base level that produces a voltage, and below that, it's just noise. Now, if you think about what a vinyl LP or an analog tape sounds like, you know what I mean. Or have you ever downloaded an MP3 file from a vinyl LP? You've heard it, right? So in low light situations, in the darker part of an image, you'll see noise to some degree. In a color image, you have 3 channels, red, green, and blue. This means that you have some noise in all 3 channels, 3 colors of noise. YIQ and YUV systems are a matrix of 59% of the green signal, 30% of the red signal, and 11% of the blue. This means that the blue signal needs to be magnified much more than the other 2, so that's why the blue channel appears noisier than the other 2 channels. To move on with the pipeline, the signal is then sliced into samples and converted into 1 and 0 digital samples. Then you have to deal with the compression issues. Well, that's for another day. Video noise can be useful for a number of applications. We hold the film image as the bar for image technology, the depth, the look, and the color palette. Oh, wait a minute. What about film grain? That's a type of noise as well. Film grain is a visual cue that the image was captured on analog film and gives us that warm, comfortable, and organic feel that what we're going to watch is the movie experience. Now back to video. Older analog video formats like 1" C format and Betacam SP suffer greatly from electrical interference, and to reduce this to a minimum, you have to use a device or a plug-in called a noise reducer. To combat this interference, technology was borrowed from the satellite industry. Satellite feeds over analog frequencies had the same problem. Telecom companies used noise reducers to minimize this problem. The first use of satellite noise reduction was in the late 70s. Noise reduction blurs the image slightly to reduce the visible noise. When you use it, you have to add some sharpening back into the image, and this is called image detail. I think of it as taking the green signal, inverting it, delaying it horizontally and vertically around the image, giving it that white edging to create the illusion of image detail. That's Lorne's simplistic explanation, but it's more sophisticated than that. Companies such as Teranex, Digital Vision, and Snell & Wilcox have great hardware solutions. Algolith Software, Graham Nattrass, and Digital Film Tools have good software solutions. Film grain. This is the residue of unexposed silver halide crystals that have been amplified during the development process. Color films are made up of emulsion layers of varying graininess levels, so each dye layer has its own grain structure. When a film has little light exposed, you could think of it like sands on the beach. The unexposed grains don't develop into an image. The grains are amplified during the development process and show up as grain. The more light information exposed on the film, the less grain you have. Film always has some grain, as it's a function of focus. No grain, the image is soft. Look at the difference between an unpopped and a popped kernel of corn as far as the edges are concerned. Now, if you have too much grain in an image, you need a device called a grain reducer. It's different to noise reduction as it affects the film grain on the screen. There are usually two sets of controls, luminance and chroma. This is the same for noise reduction. Film grain is more random than video noise, so it takes different methods to slow the grain down as you're dealing with a different grain pattern on each individual film frame. No two frames are alike. If you don't have access to these plugins, there are some tricks you can apply that have similar but not as far-reaching effects. I'm working on the shot of this lady and looking great. Color balance is good, flesh tones are good. The only thing is, I notice her eyes are looking a little soft, and your eyes are windows to the soul, so I just want to make sure those are peaked up a little bit. So what I'm going to do is come over here and I'm going to build a little mask to go around her eyes. So I'm going to duplicate the track. I'm going to look for a mask shape and a mask feather mask shape. I'll put those on the track here. I'm going to put the sharpening filter down below, and as you can see, it's cranked up to 9, so it makes it really obvious where which area is sharpened. So I'm going to build these little glasses. I'm going to change the order that I need to feather the shape after I create it. So I'll do the size to get that little rectangle. Let me just go down here so you can see what I'm doing. Change this, and I'm just going to center that on her eyes, and you can see what the shot looks like. So now I'm just going to invert that selection, and I'll come down here, just bring the sharpness down. Now, because of the material that I'm working with, it's a little hard to see, but we'll do this from a theory point of view, that here you can see that I peaked her eyes up. I know it's cranked up a little too high, but it just makes it easier for you to see. And then I just want to make sure that the edge is feathered. You don't want a sharp edge, but let me just soften that up a little bit, and then I'll just swing over to the big monitor in half a second, but there. And you can see that sharpened up a little bit. This is a limitation of the footage that I'm working with the file size or whatever, but you kind of get the idea. Just to peak them up a little bit, so if there's a white glint from a reflector board in the center, that's shown so you can see it. But these are little tidy up things that you can do if you get through your color correction quick and you want to put some more effort into the shot. This is one good thing to do. Okay, next shot, I have a shot of a prairie field, and looks pretty good, but you know, everything is in focus. I don't know what I'm supposed to be looking at here. So what I'd like to do here is I'm going to just duplicate this clip. I'm going to do the same thing here. I'll go after mask shape and mask feather, and a sharpen on the bottom track. I'm all set here. So there we go. Just have to change the order here, and I'm going to just kind of split the screen in half. And I mean, this is what directors of photography do. They point the action from one part of the screen. Whatever's important is in focus. Whatever isn't important is out of focus. So I'm going to feather this up. So it's going to look something like this. So I'm going to put the foreground out of focus, leaving the background in focus. And let me just come down to the bottom layer and reduce the sharpness a little bit, and it'll end up looking something like that. So these are all little subtle things that you can add, but they'll help. Again, limitation of the footage here. I'll just bring that down a little bit. And you know, you'll have to add a color corrector in the foreground just to darken that up a little bit, and you should be good. Now, you're looking at the picture and you're probably saying to yourself, hey Lauren, those images look really noisy. Is there anything you can do? Well, yes. I've got this shot here, and what I've done is, for purposes of viewing this, I have two layered shots. I have the noise reduction version on V1 and no noise reduction on V2. So the left-hand side of the screen has noise reduction and the right side doesn't. So if I play this, we can see the noise flying through there. So today I'm using Graham Natras's noise reduction plug-in. As I mentioned, there are other plugins you can use, but this one I was able to just grab quickly. So what I'm going to do is tell the system what noise is. So I'm going to switch over to Edge Mask, and you get your display. So you tell the system by virtue of what is a darker shade, you can tell the system that that area is noise. So there's a whole bunch of noise in the sky and a whole bunch right on the building. And you know what? I told you the wrong thing. Left side, yeah, left side is noise reduction. So okay, so that's right. So I've got my system set up to about 9. I'm just going to switch over here to temporal averaging. And when I roll through the scene, let me just go back over to this side. You can see how the right side is quite a bit noisier than the left side, but I don't want to blur it out. The difference between noise reduction, it looks similar to blurring. Blurring is applied all over the screen, whereas noise reduction looks at the pixel difference from one field to the next. And if you know, you're going along pixel by pixel, if it sees the brightness level jumping up and down on those pixels, it tries to blend those together so they don't go kind of black and white, they go more gray. So it's kind of a selective blur filter, and it's you know, it's looking for movement from frame to frame. So this is what noise reduction is, and be careful when you use this that it also attacks motion, that if you have somebody walking through the scene and you have the plug-in cranked up to 99, it's going to think that that person walking through the scene is a big chunk of noise, either a big piece of grain or a big piece of noise, and it'll try and noise reduce that person, and you'll end up with a blurring image. So just be careful of that. So here's some links for you to check out. Here's a link for ergonomics, a link for sharpening your image, and some information on noise reduction. Lauren's picks this week for visual effects and color correction are the Gone with the Wind Remake Special Edition. There's an awesome feature at the end that talks about restoring this Technicolor film. Very, very interesting, so you can check that out. And as far as next week's class, there is no next week's class. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Mike Seymour and John Montgomery for their help, and a special thanks to you for your input, patience, and ideas. I hope these classes were of value to you, and I greatly enjoyed putting them together. I'll keep in touch on the forum, so if there's any questions that you have, I'll try and answer them or point you in the right direction. I think FX PhD works because of you and the free flow of your ideas and points of view. Thanks again, and good luck.